World Bank Group board. Before we start, let me remind you that today's seminar is recorded and that the presentations you're about to see will be available for you after the session, so you'll all have the information available. After this about 1 hour session, we will have time for Q&A. Excuse me. So you can write down your questions in the Q&A session in the chat box, and the participants will be able to answer. So as I mentioned, today's webinar will present IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, and will focus on agriculture, although it can be applicable for any other sector. The discussion on agriculture is very timely, given in COVID and the recent developments, and very relevant for mature companies, startups, and I'm glad to present here the excellent speakers that are here with us today. So we'll have opening remarks from Natalie and Beatrice, then the overview of IFC and the collaboration with the Israeli private sector from Paula, IFC's activities in the agri-tech sector from Peter Cook, and the IFC activities in the agribusiness sector in Kenya and Ghana specifically from Richard and Yusuke. And then we'll have Q&A questions and Q&A session and closing remarks. With that, let me turn to our first speaker, Natalie Goodman, who's the Minister of Economic and Trade Affairs in the Embassy of Israel in Washington, D.C. Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vav. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today in this important webinar. Let me just introduce ourselves very shortly. The Economic and Trade Mission in the Embassy of Israel in Washington, D.C. is part of the Israeli Ministry of Economy network of commercial attachés, which are located in 45 different business cities around the globe. I think we will have in our participant in the attendee side today some of my colleagues from Asia and Africa, and this is really showing how we operate as one network, which our main goal is to assist Israeli companies in their global marketing efforts, and by that to help them to increase and diversify Israeli export. Our mission here in DC is quite unique as it operates 3 different portfolios. We are dealing with trade policies issues vis-a-vis the federal administration here in Washington. We also active as in trade promotion like all my colleagues around the world. And we also work intensively with the Development Financial Institute. And under this framework, we aim to showcase Israeli innovation within different activities of the DFIs, to raise the awareness of Israeli companies to opportunities of different activities of the banks, and to facilitate any other additional collaboration between Israel and the banks. Israel is a highly innovative country. I think this is quite clear, especially for in this forum. What is even more interesting for me is how other countries and organizations realize the importance of innovation and its role in reaching growth and prosperity and allowing for sustainable development. At this point, the role of the World Bank and the IFC as a member of the World Bank Group is crucial to bring this innovation to the developing world, and we believe Israel can contribute to this effort quite strongly. Therefore, we are a proud donor country in view of WRG funds, the DDP and 2030 WRG, and former donor of Tech Emerge Fund led by IFC. And we see it as a key and significant partner in implementing innovation, which has the ability to enhance economic and social impact. By promoting action that will ensure sustainability in developing countries. As part of these partnerships, Israel is delighted to share its experience and extensive knowledge gained over the years as well as its approach and efforts to promote technological solutions that can address the challenges facing developing countries. We believe it is highly important to increase the awareness of Israeli companies to the main goals of the IFI's funds and the activities they conduct. We strongly encourage Israeli companies to take part in projects that can improve people's lives and create positive impact. We look forward to creating similar events in the future in different sectors. I would like to thank the IFC representatives, Yovav Gavish, the representative of Israel in the board of directors of the World Bank, Adi Khalifa from my team, who managed the relation with the World Bank, and our colleagues from the Ministry of Finance in Israel for the fruitful collaboration and the opportunity to hold this knowledge sharing session. I hope we will have a very interesting morning. Thank you all.
Thanks very much, Natalie. Let me turn to Beatrice Masters, Special Representative Western Europe from IFC. Hello, Beatrice. Pleasure. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Yovav and Natalie, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm really delighted to be here in today's webinar to discuss the opportunities for Israeli companies with IFC in emerging markets. But let me first thank the Israel Foreign Trade Administration at the Ministry of Economy and Industry, the Economic Mission to Washington, D.C., and the Ministry of Finance for organizing this event. This event is actually part of a series of business development events that we kicked off back in March 2021 with an event focused on investments in disruptive technologies in healthcare. And of course, I also would like to thank my IFC colleagues who are all joining from different parts of the world for their participation today. Let me give you a brief overview of IFC and our work with Israel. IFC, as you probably all know, is a member of the World Bank Group, and it's focused on advancing economic development and improving the lives of people by encouraging the growth of the private sector in developing countries. So we achieved this by creating new markets, mobilizing other investors, and sharing our global expertise on private sector development. In doing so, we generate jobs and raise living standards, especially for the poor and vulnerable. In financial year 21, IFC committed a record $31 billion, of which 12 billion were from IFC's own accounts, and the rest, as I said, were mobilized from other investors. IFC's committed portfolio stands about $65 billion, spread out over more than 300 projects in more than 70 countries. Nearly a fourth of the projects were located in Africa, whereas the technology sector amounted to 10% and the agri sector to 6%. Now, our mandate in Western Europe and Israel is twofold. First, managing the relationship with European and Israeli stakeholders. That includes our shareholders. So we have like a shareholder representative from Israel here with Yovav. And second, identifying business opportunities with private sector clients that are keen to invest in emerging markets. Western Europe and Israel also plays a critical role in supporting IFC's strategy to create a pipeline of bankable projects in emerging markets and mobilize investment. We work with partners such as host governments, development finance institutions, bilateral development partners and donors, and most importantly, of course, with the private sector. IFC's Western Europe team coordinates our business development efforts and the overall activities in the region, and we have dedicated country managers and industry leads. My colleague Paula Alayo, who is the country manager for Israel, will speak shortly about our strategy to engage with private sector companies in Israel. Now to the importance of agriculture and technology for IFC. IFC has made agribusiness a priority because of its potential for broad development impact and in particular, its strong role in poverty reduction. IFC provides investment and advisory services to help the sector address increasing demand in an environmentally sustainable and socially inclusive way. We invest across the whole agribusiness supply chain, so from farm to retail, to help boost production, increase liquidity, improve logistics and distribution, and expand access to credit for small farmers. Often, IFC also supports early-stage technology companies in developing countries that are creating new markets, transforming industries, and driving inclusive growth while realizing strong returns. By investing in best-in-class entrepreneurs, we support the creation of tech-enabled venture asset class across emerging markets that fosters private sector growth. IFC's portfolio in the agri sector stands at over 1.6 billion in 50 companies. And having one of the largest footprints in emerging markets, we offer growth and expansion capital, local and sector knowledge, and connections to a global network of other clients and portfolios to identify, incubate, and scale business models that can have a significant impact. Cooperation with partners is crucial to achieve our objectives. With Israel's support, IFC has been running the award-winning matchmaking program Tech Emerge, which was launched in January of 2016 in Tel Aviv to connect innovative proven technology companies from around the world with corporates in emerging markets to conduct pilot projects and build commercial partnerships. Supported by a global network of industry advisors, we pilot projects that are tailored to respond to local needs, building commercial relationships in vital sectors, maximizing social impact and spurring innovation. So to conclude, we are very excited about collaborating more with all of you, and me and all of the IFC's representatives are looking forward to our today's discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for these important remarks, and it's indeed very impressive and in this very significant sector. So thank you for that. With that, let me now turn to Paula Alayo, who's the country manager for Israel, to give an overview of IFC in collaboration with the Israeli private sector. Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yobav. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning and a good afternoon to all the participants, and a big thank you again, Yobav, Natalie, Adi, and everyone behind the scenes that have helped us put this event together. If you allow me, I'll very quickly put on my presentation. Hopefully you can all see it now. I think you can, right? I think that's a yes.
Yes.
So perfect. Let me just put full screen, which might be better. Let me see. There you go. So it's a pleasure to be here today. As mentioned earlier, I'm the IFC country manager for Israel. And as Beatrice mentioned, part of my role, or the two key parts of my role, is one, maintaining the relationship with the Israeli government, our shareholders, but also different partners in Israel, in terms of promoting private sector development in emerging markets. And the second part is finding Israeli companies that are looking into invest or to work in emerging markets, and hopefully providing the solutions that will attract them to come in and promote the private sector in these countries. So with that, I'll just go quickly through the presentation, which has four main parts. One, it's a quick overview of IFC. Second, what we do in Western Europe. And these two parts I'll go rather quickly because Beatrice made an excellent overview, but just for those that have joined later, I think it might be useful just to take a quick glimpse of what it is. And then the two most important parts is what is it that we're actually doing with Israeli companies? And last but not least, what is the value added that IFC can bring all of you as Israeli companies that are looking to invest or to engage in projects in emerging markets? So with that, I'll just go ahead. So IFC, as mentioned by Beatrice, is one of the 5 institutions of the World Bank Group. We're right in the center of the slide. we were created in 1956, and our mandate is to promote private sector development in emerging markets by providing solutions in the form of financial products, advice, in the forms of our technical assistance, but also mobilizing resources from third parties. We're a member of the bank, of the group, as I mentioned. We have a AAA rated, we're a AAA rated institution, over 60-year history investing in emerging market. And although size is not the most important, we like to mention often that we're the largest private sector development bank in emerging markets. We are owned by 185 member countries, Israel being one of them. And we have more than 100 regional offices with approximately a total of 4,000 staff, of which over 55% are based in emerging markets. And this is something we always like to highlight because I think it's one of the key value addeds of IFC to our sponsors or to the companies that we work with. It's our presence on the ground and our understanding of what it is to invest and work in emerging markets. Our portfolio is very big. I mean, just in terms of, to give you a sense of magnitude, since inception, we've invested over $320 billion in emerging markets, which is quite large. At the end of the fiscal year, FY21, which is end of June, where we close our books, our total portfolio was $64 billion. And if you look at the slide per industry and per map or region, there's two main industries, financial institutions and infrastructure. But I will point your attention to manufacturing, agribusiness and services, and disruptive technologies and funds, which is the 35% of the portfolio, which is where we're focusing this morning, agribusiness and agri-tech. In terms of regions, you see we're well diversified, but again, I'll bring your attention to the weight of the sub-Saharan Africa portfolio. And it's 18%. If you were to look at emerging markets and put the weight based on GDP, we would expect a much smaller percentage in sub-Saharan Africa. But part of the reason why it's so big is it's our commitment and effort and strategy going forward to do more in Africa. And so we hope, as we know, Israeli companies are very active in this market, that today's presentation will be quite useful to you. This fiscal year, as Beatriz mentioned, was a record year. We had a record high commitments of 31.5 billion. There's a lot of numbers here, but I think what I would point your attention to is two main messages. One is that we consistently invest approximately about 20 billion, 25 billion a year in emerging markets, which is not an insignificant amount, and that approximately 50% comes from our own balance sheet. So, and another 50% from third-party capital that we mobilize, that, as mentioned earlier, is one of our main mandates. So what do we do? To summarize it in a very simple form, we have three main products and four main industries that we focus on. Investment products, which is anything from senior debt to equity and anything in between. So we are a financial institution that lends or provides capital to projects in emerging markets that need this long-term capital to put together a bankable project that will succeed in terms of financial returns and sustainability. Two, equally important, we provide advice. We help create markets. We help unlock investment opportunities to attract private sector investment into this market. And we set a standard in terms of our ESG performance standards, which is typically a stamp of approval and something that has a lot of value in the markets that where we operate. And last but not least, we have the IFC Asset Management Company, which you could think of as a general partner in the sense of private equity that mobilizes third-party capital, equity capital, into emerging markets with us, and which has raised at the end of the fiscal year $10 billion in capital, of which approximately $2 billion come from IFC. In terms of industries, we divide the world into four main industries: manufacturing, agribusiness and services, financial institutions, infrastructure, and what we call disruptive technologies and funds, which includes all of our VC investments, including agri-tech. As you can imagine, our mandate is very wide. We have all the emerging markets and we have many industries to cover. So we try to maximize our developmental impact, but also maintain our financial sustainability by being very focused by industries, by challenge, and by region. So when you look by industries, we have three main focus areas, which are infrastructure, agribusiness, financial inclusion, and health and education. And again, I bring your attention to agribusiness by the reason of this webinar today, but also an area where Israel has great expertise. We put our focus in terms of challenges on climate finance, fragility, and digital economy. Again, highlighting digital, everything that is tech related, where clearly Israel has expertise and a clear competitive advantage. And then focus regions, Africa, MENA, and South Asia, MENA being the Middle East and North Africa, of course. Which represents or is illustrated by the breakdown of our portfolio, but also where the greatest needs are in terms of development. We also have some other cross-cutting priorities, but again, if I had to highlight something, would be the sustainability angle in terms of both the financial sustainability, but equally important, the ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards, which are critical to any IFC investment. So now quickly, IFC in Western Europe. So we're a strategic platform to engage with European clients, stakeholders, and our shareholders. You might be wondering, Israel falls under the Western Europe umbrella because you're in a neighboring region, but in terms of the World Bank definitions, you are considered a developed country, like the rest of Western Europe. And so our mandate is as Beatriz excellently explained, has two main areas of focus. One is being coordinations and consensus building with our shareholders, partners, and everyone else that we work in promoting private sector development in emerging markets and meeting our development goals. But secondly, also the business development and client relationship management. And this event today would fall into this category in the sense that our aim is to identify the Israeli companies that are looking to invest or already investing or working in emerging markets, and hopefully being able to promote the private investment into emerging markets and bring both the standards and the expertise that will help these projects be successful. Our portfolio in Western Europe at the end of the fiscal year, again, June, it's about $16 billion, which is not small. If you think about it, it's about 25% of the total IFC portfolio. Again, we see a big weight of financial institutions and infrastructure, but again, manufacturing, business and services and disruptive technologies, very important as well. In terms of region, the breakdown is slightly different than the general IFC portfolio. It can be explained partly by the proximity of certain regions, and that's why you will see Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa with a very important weight in what we do. And this is in terms of the projects that we finance, where are they being developed, right? Not the origin of the companies or that invested in these projects. So what do we do with Israeli corporates? The most important or interesting part of my presentation. So at the end of the fiscal year, we have a portfolio of $73 million. This is long-term investments with Israeli companies. This is for 6 projects and 4 different companies. If you see the breakdown, a very big focus on Sub-Saharan Africa. It's 43% of the portfolio, followed by Europe and Central Asia with another 25%. And again, it's reflect a little bit of the breakdown of Western Europe. It's a proximity, but also where we see Israeli companies more active in. This is a big shift in terms of breakdown, which reflects the competitiveness of Israeli companies as well. Big focus on manufacturing, agribusiness, and services, which is 63% of the portfolio. And there I would highlight it's primarily all agribusiness. So it is quite relevant to the audience this morning. Then we have this infrastructure with 27% and disruptive technologies and funds, which is our VC business, which is still growing. It's 5%, but where we've been seeing growth and where Peter today, one of my colleagues, will be speaking about a recent investment in an agri-tech company. And then you have a little bit that the progression per fiscal year, which shows that every year we maintain an active portfolio that despite repayments and everything else, is stable. Here, this slide, I will just briefly touch upon on some examples of what we've done in recent years. The most recent are C3 and Netafim. So C3 was a 8 million equity investment, a VC investment. It's an agri-tech company. And I will not say much more because Peter Cook, our lead of agri-tech, who is presenting right after me, will give you a much more detailed overview. So I don't want to steal some of his thunder. Then we have Netafim, which is a global leader in irrigation technology, as we all know. So very different in size compared to C3, but this gives you a sense that we can make very small investments and very large investments. And it's a financing package to support their expansion in China, Africa, and Turkey. And my colleague, Richard Kolbeck, who's also in the webinar today, will speak more about what we've done with them. Beyond the financing, but also the advisory service, the advice component that I mentioned before as a key part of our value added to companies. Then we have two more dated transactions, but not the less interesting. We had a 20 million transaction with GLAD and the West Indian Ocean Cable Company. And that again was to promote the connection to telecommunications, which is also part of our investments. And infrastructure, and it was very successful. And then Ashstrom, this is the most dated investment, which we financed. They had the infrastructure and the concession for one of the airports in Jamaica, and we financed that project many years ago. Again, very successful, where we also mobilized financing from third parties to a syndication. So I hope if you remember anything today of my presentation, I'm hoping it is this last slide, which I think is the most valuable to any company, is why should we work with us? You should work with us. And it's basically our value added. And we have 6 main categories of value added. But I think first and foremost, and hopefully my colleagues, when they present later, they will be able to give more specific examples of this, is the long-term and patient capital. We've been investing in emerging markets for over 60 years. We offer bespoke financial solutions, which mean that we will adapt our financing products, tenors, currencies to make the project successful and that fit to the cash flow of any given project. Our commitment to emerging markets is continuous. So despite of any crisis or anything that might happen, we will continue to support your operations. And so we see ourselves as a partner for the long term of our clients. And I think that's one of the key areas that I would say, why do companies work with us? And of course, not least, is our ability to bring also the mobilization and both debt and equity that make the putting together a financial package much easier than if you have to have multiple parallel dialogues with different lenders or equity providers. Then we have country risk mitigation. Because of the nature of our institution, we're a financial development finance institution that is owned by the countries where we invest in. So we have something that is called preferred creditor status, but we have a very strong relationship with the government directly as IFC, but also as part of the World Bank Group. And then there's great benefits that can be quantifiable. For instance, the fact that we don't pay withholding tax, there's a withholding tax benefit, which makes the financing also more attractive in terms of cost. So this is the country risk mitigation can be even monetized in terms of the withholding tax exemption, but it's also a way to keep an active dialogue with the government and ensure the best interests of all in any given project. Then global sector expertise, which you will be able to test or confirm yourselves when we have Peter, Joe, and Richard give us an overview of how we work with different companies and in different sectors and in different regions, and you will see yourself the industry expertise and regional expertise that we have, which touches upon the regional knowledge as well, which is also highlighted by our presence in these markets, having offices and people on the ground that understand the dynamics of working in this market. And then last but not least, I would highlight again the environment and social risk management and the sustainability toolkit, not only in terms of our performance standards, but also of helping companies engage with the communities, in terms of in strengthening the supply chain. And as we all know, as we're speaking, COP26 is about to start. So this is we have always thought this is very important, and we've been implementing this for 60 years. but I think that the climate crisis and everything that is happening makes it more important to focus on this in these sectors or in these areas. And undoubtedly, the IFC expertise could make this a lot easier for any given client. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. It is a pleasure to be here today. I'll pass it now to my colleague, Peter Cook. Peter is our global lead for Agri-Tech. So he looks at all of our VC investments in Agri-Tech. He worked very closely with C3, and he'll be able to share a little bit more about our experience and how we work with companies. Thank you again, and look forward to your questions later in the webinar.
Peter, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So sorry for that. I hope you can see my screen. I'd like to introduce what we're doing in the ag tech space. So I'm part of the IFC Disruptive Technology and Funds team, and I'll explain a bit about what we're doing. As you know, IFC is one of the largest investors in emerging markets, and particularly in funds, where we have nearly $7.5 billion invested in 355 funds. And so the Disruptive Technology team, or the venture team, sits alongside our PE funds team. And so so that's a combined number of VC funds and PE funds. And specifically, our VC portfolio is about nearly $1.5 million across 50 direct investments or 60 direct investments and 50 fund investments. And the funds cover a number of areas. So we have growth equity funds, but also VC funds, including seed funds, accelerators, and typically our direct investments start at Series B and later. So we try to cover the early part of the startups ecosystem with a couple of other windows. One's called the IFC Startup Catalyst, which invests in seed and incubators and accelerators. Then we invest through VC funds typically. We have a couple of we have one ag tech fund that we invested in Latin America, but mostly we invest in generalist funds. And then our direct investments start typically at Series B, as I said. And then we have our colleagues that invest in PE and growth funds, and they can follow on, or our colleagues in our mainstream industry teams can also come in after we invest. So we're trying to cover the whole capital stack here and financing stage. So our ticket size in direct investments is typically starts at say $2.5 million and can go up to $20 million. We look to co-invest with at least another strong financial co-investor, and we target very high returns, because obviously there's a lot of failures in venture, so you need to compensate for that to come out with a decent IRR on a portfolio basis. And we look for strong alignment on terms with other investors, and that's very important for us. In VC funds, as I said, we're typically looking at 5 to 10 million ticket to start, typically a regionally based fund, and typically a generalist or multi-sector fund. I'll talk more about the one ag tech fund we have invested in Latin America a little bit later. And in terms of earlier than that, the ecosystem building, as I mentioned, we invest through our Startup Catalyst program, and we have a number of other ways we can build the ecosystem. One one other thing that we do is called the Tech Emerge platform. And that we've done in health in India and in Brazil. And we're doing now in cooling, including sustainable cooling in the agri-cold chain. We're trying to accelerate the best technologies from wherever in the world into select countries. And that's more, it's not an investment per se, but it's a program to match make. And it's been fairly successful and well received. And we also work with women entrepreneurs and have a fund set aside to support those entrepreneurs. And we do a number of other digital skill training in cooperation with the World Bank. In the disruptive tech or venture capital team, we invest across a number of sectors, including ag tech, but you see the other sectors there. And we work with our mainstream teams, as necessary. They have great set of experience, contacts, and specialists who we can bring in to look at our venture deals when necessary. And so that's a great advantage we have, and we certainly do that in agriculture. So I think you're probably maybe quite familiar with this, but these are the large macro trends that we think make the investment in ag tech necessary. You have a food security challenge across many countries, worsened by growing populations and climate change. And the spin-off from that typically is a large environmental footprint. You have problems of inefficient supply chains, and we've made investments there, which I can talk about, which make food loss worse, and again reduce the food that reaches the consumer. You have small holders in many markets, which face marginal incomes and weak yields, and this again stresses the whole food system. So we think that agricultural technology, ag tech, can address a lot of these challenges, including making farmers more productive, supply chains more efficient, and reducing the environmental footprint where possible. So it's a lot of this can be addressed with technology, and I would also say new business models. Sometimes you taking technology that exists, but you're doing it in a new way. Typically from a startup, which can be quite, can move aggressively to implement a new business model and improve the performance of the sector. As you may have seen the graph on the right, often, it's just a McKinsey graph that shows that digitization in agriculture is, the lowest of 22 different sectors. So that, I think that a lot can be done just with digitization to connect various parts of the agriculture value chain to bring more information and visibility to players so they can react in the right way. We've seen, as the graphs on the left show, we've seen a lot of VC funding going into ag tech in recent years. It's spread across a number of subsectors in ag tech, including biotech and innovative foods, where I've seen Israeli companies quite active, but also marketplaces and on-farm management tools, particularly, again, taking advantage of digital there to just implement things that may be done on paper now, but making them much more efficient and potentially, bigger with digital. What you see, for example, with Amazon and just e-commerce marketplaces, you're now starting to see in agri with inputs and also selling outputs, selling crops on digital platforms, and this can really help all players to access better prices and move more quickly. In novel farming, I'll mention we're referring to controlled environment agriculture, which is indoor farming, vertical farming, advanced greenhouses, and we see Israeli companies active in those areas, particularly advanced greenhouses, and we think that there's going to be continued rollout of those kind of projects. So what can IFC do in ag tech? We can do a number of things. We have strong convening power as IFC, and we've done things like Tech Emerge in other sectors. We may do it in ag tech. We've held conferences on smallholder supply chains and green growth for that include ag tech and agriculture as part of an overall effort to improve the climate performance of various sectors. So we're convening conferences where we have expertise across a number of not only sectors across the economy, but it's particularly in agri. We have about 12 different industrial experts across a number of subsectors, and I think that gives us, helps us gain insight into markets and to what's happening in the wider sector when we're investing in an ag tech company. On the right, you'll see just a smattering of some of the portfolio, which I'll come back to. But we invest in generalist funds that also make investments in ag tech, and I'll talk about the portfolio in a moment. These are some of the initiatives that we're doing across the ecosystem. We're an information provider. We publish papers on agriculture and how to make agriculture smart with AI. And we do this across a number of sectors. We are a convener, as I mentioned, across convening people with various kinds of conferences where we support advisory service, which can engage alongside our investment teams to work with smallholders on productivity and food safety. And we work with a number of partners in these areas, such as Better Life Farming, where we're working with a large input manufacturer. We're working with GAF-SB to occasionally use blended finance or sub-commercial financing to support select agriculture projects. And then we have, as we move towards the right in terms of our commitments, we have the investment in direct and direct investments, which I've mentioned. So one of the things that got us going in ag tech in the past, 4 years, when we started looking at this area about 4 years ago, was that we were seeing in our agricultural portfolio through our mainstream agribusiness team that our clients were looking to adopt ag tech, and we're looking seriously and piloting things. And we can mention Jane in that, as well as a number of others like Bioparques, which is a Mexican tomato grower. So this is one of the things that gave us the kind of on the ground intel that things were really moving in ag tech. So what I'd like to mention, just going back one more slide, is that a few of the things that we've done in the ag tech sector, through the investments we've made. We invested in a company called AgroStar, which is an online platform in India that offers online access for farmers for high quality inputs, as well as agronomic advice via a call center, as well as on the app, on a smartphone app. As you may know, in India and a number of other places, smartphones are increasing, but they're not the majority of mobile phones. Many people still have feature phones. So it's necessary to have call centers there, and they do that, and they've rolled out the model successfully, and they're continuing to expand. And so we feel that that's a promising model. They're also going omni-channel and building out retail shops, so in addition to the digital. And in Africa, and specifically in Kenya, we've invested in a company called Twiga, which started out small, connecting with digital apps and connecting small farmers that were growing bananas and mangoes to small retailers through their platform. so that they can move these products quickly to the market to prevent waste and get better prices for the farmers. So we're cutting out some of the middlemen and ultimately getting better prices, reducing waste. And IFC's initially invested $3 million at an early stage, and we've continued to support them with other investments. And this has been I think a good story in Kenya. In Indonesia, we've invested with a technology company that uses IoT to optimize the fish feed or the feed for shrimp farmers. As you know, this is a very big industry in Southeast Asia, and this helps them, reduce the cost of their feed and grow shrimp more efficiently. So they've also quite cleverly, I think, connected their farmers to marketplaces that they've built for feed and for their fish, ultimately to sell to restaurants and to other wholesalers. And they're also connecting them with finance, which I think is a general trend. You see a lot of these platforms add on features as they go in financing and marketplaces. So this is something we're seeing. In Latin America, I did mention that we invested in a fund, an ag tech fund. This one's called SP Ventures, is the manager, and Ag Ventures 2 is the investment fund. They're targeting. They are not yet reached their final close, but they're targeting $50 million. IFC's committed $10 million, and we have a co-investment window of an additional 10. And this helps us invest more efficiently. If there's a small deal, we can get involved a little bit earlier. We can get involved more efficiently by investing alongside our fund manager, and we're doing that. We have a window here set up with SP Ventures, and we're doing that across a number of other funds. But we hope to be making co-investments here with SP Ventures in the ecosystem in Latin America. Specifically, they're quite active in Brazil and Argentina. C-Tree was an investment we made about a year ago now in an Israeli company. We led the round with $8 million, and it was a Series B. They have a very talented, deep bench of AI scientists, and they have people on the ground in Brazil and California. They have a franchise arrangement in South Africa. They're increasing their presence in Europe and in Florida. And they're looking at specifically at tree crops, or permanent crops, as we call them. So they're looking at a number of aspects of growing fruit, whether it's tree health, yield estimation, and trying to identify through AI disease and pests at as early as possible stage when it's not yet visible to the naked eye. And so we're quite excited about them, and look forward to supporting their growth particularly in emerging markets where we have great connectivity. Appeal Science is a company we've invested in. It's a U.S. company that has a plant-based shelf extension coating. They work as close to the farm as possible, close to the pack house as possible, to coat fruits and vegetables that are then currently sold into U.S. and European retailers, and hopefully with IFC's help to local retailers as well in emerging markets. But they're primarily working right now in Africa and Latin America, and will probably be entering Asia in the next year or two. We invested $15 million in that company, and that was a rather late investment for us in a Series D. And I'll just stop here just for, you'll notice that we invested in a couple of what we call global companies. C-Tree, Appeal, these are companies that are based in advanced countries that are not emerging markets, but we can work with such companies where we feel that they have very impactful, unique technology, and help them, if we can make the case to our board, help them go to emerging markets and deepen their business in those countries. I'll mention one other company which is very interesting. It's a co-investment with a fund in a Brazilian-based fund. It's called Pattern Ag. It's actually a U.S. company, but going to Brazil. It was spun out of a company builder called the Production Board, and it's focused on soil DNA and helping the farmer diagnose exactly what's in their soil, what they need to worry about and treat, and what they don't need to worry about and treat. So it's aims to save them effort and cost by making the right chemical treatments. And ultimately, they are building a database around soils and the DNA of what is in soils, and then potentially they can help with partners or directly to design biological treatments. So I've mentioned AgriStar. I don't think I need to go too much deeper, but I think you can see here that we've invested with a fund called Charate Ventures. It was co-investment. We're also bringing to the table, our advisory services, which are helping them with in low-income states to help increase the productivity of smallholders. We're also helping them with some of our expertise to look at as they develop credit profiles for farmers, because they want to add a lending capability there. And Twiga, this is a deeper dive on Twiga, which I've also talked about. And I won't go deeper, but I will say that their platform allows for full traceability of their products by and that is it's very powerful to build trust with the retailers and the consumer ultimately. So we're working across a number of sectors in ag tech, and broadly in terms of the problems or the touch points that and the challenges that we're addressing. It's agricultural productivity, which is a major challenge, and it's a major that we're addressing not only at IFC but across the World Bank Group. Finance and insurance is another major challenge. As everyone knows, farmers need finance every year, if not more than once a year they need it. So finance and insurance and increasing access, and also the transparency of that, and bringing more of a market-based system to accessing finance so that they can decrease their own costs is another major challenge. And thirdly, I'll say supply chain and logistics in emerging markets, especially where you have a lot of smallholders. There's typically an inefficient supply chain, results in low prices to farmers, high wastage, and we're really increasing our investments across that space. I'll give you an example there. We're invested in Grocery in the Philippines, which is sourcing food from farmers and bringing to smallholder retailers. Also, an investor in Max AB, which is a similar company based in Egypt. And lastly, the environmental impacts of agriculture cannot be ignored, and we're trying, as we're doing across the sectors we work in IFC, to reduce the climate change impact, the climate impact of the sector. And we think that can be done through reducing chemicals and reducing food wastage in the supply chain. So that's the presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have. You can contact me at that email address if you have any interest to continue the conversation. But happy to answer any questions you may have. But hope that was informative for you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Peter, for this excellent overview, and I'm sure there will be many questions. But since we're a little bit behind, let me now go to the next session on IFC's activities in agribusiness sector in Kenya and Ghana. Richard Colbeck, who's the agribusiness industry specialist from IFC, will kick us off for this session. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and Zerayim Tovim for those of us joining from Israel today. Thank you very much. I'd like to start with a little bit of an introduction to who I am. Hopefully, I can get my PowerPoint to come up on the viewer for you. One moment, I'll just see if I can get that to go full full size and get rid of some of the junk in the background. I think it's useful just to introduce myself quickly, who I am, my background, and some of the people at IFC that you might get an opportunity to work with. I'm an agronomist and an irrigation engineer. I study both agronomy and irrigation engineering. In fact, I studied in Bet Dagan at the Volcani Institute, as well as in the UK. So I've spent some time in Israel, and I've got a great appreciation for the agricultural sector there, having worked in it, having researched in it. I've also been a farmer in Africa, so I've worked actually in farming. I've got my hands in the soil, and my boots in the mud, and my car stuck on the road many, many times. I'm now an industry specialist. I work specifically in this sector, and I was the industry specialist that worked with Netafim. I went out to visit their plants in China, in Turkey, had many meetings with them in Israel, went into several of their plants in Africa, and more recently in India. So I come from a practical background. I've actually done the work, I've studied the work, I've lived in Israel and researched in Israel, and I traveled alongside my partners, my clients, my friends who I work with in the industry. So it's a personal and a professional relationship that builds up with people within IFC over time, and that's why over time you'll see some of our partners, some of our clients come back time and time again, because it's a deep relationship, not just on the financial side, but on the technical side as well. And we share risk. We share risk traveling with you. We share risk investing with you. We share risk coming up with solutions and trying to make them work. And it's a very, very useful relationship, but it's quite broad as well. I mean, I'm talking from my perspective today about what I do on sustainable crop production. I lead a team of specialists, some of them with farming in their background practically, some of them with PhDs, much more technical, much more academic in terms of their approach. But there are 4 different platforms that we run with in agriculture. One on food safety that looks at food safety management systems and standards, basically making sure that food, when it's produced, can be exported, it's export quality, and it's safe to consume. The second one is sustainable crop production. Everything that takes place in the field, the physical work in the field, that's what we work on. So agronomy, soil and water management, irrigation, etc. We started to move also into nutrition because we realized that by growing nutritious crops, we could take some of the impacts of what we were doing in the field and actually improve the outcomes outside the field. Sustainable protein that looks at all of the animal side of products, whether that be dairy or beef or poultry, or even into aquaculture. And then on the smallholder supply chain, it takes a similar approach to what my team does in the field, but says, let's do this in the classroom. Let's talk about professionalizing smallholder farmers. Let's talk about training them with financial skills, with the ability to run their businesses more professionally, so that when you engage with them through a supply chain, there's more consistency, there's more reliability. They can access finance from banks themselves. So we have these 4 platforms. These are the main platforms. And then cross-cutting all of it are subjects such as gender, where we look at the role that women play in food safety, sustainable crop production, etc. Because in agriculture, women are huge contributors to productivity, but not necessarily always financed to the same degree or trained to the same degree. And so we look to mainstream the thinking around gender and the role of women in the businesses that they contribute. They lead and they run at times, but many cases they're not getting the same level of support. So I'd like to take, I'm not going to take long with my presentation today. I'm just going to talk about a couple of things. You've already heard us talk about Netafim a couple of times, and many of you who, if you've lived in Israel or you're familiar with it, are proud of the work that Netafim has done in irrigation in particular. It's a technology company. It's not just an irrigation company. It actually has irrigation control systems, and it thinks very much as service more than just as equipment. And so we've entered into a fantastic relationship with them. Approximately $100 million between 2018 and 2021. And the growth has actually gone into India, China, Turkey, and Africa. Most recently in India, to give you an idea of how we're thinking and how Netafim are thinking, we're looking to give some flexibility in a country that's really struggling with COVID-19. Now, it's longer term than that, because Israel has a strategic interest in India, and India has a huge population and the ability to do a great deal more, and a lot of support for the technology that Netafim provides. So Netifim is bringing in a thinking around agriculture, a way of doing business and a structure, as well as the technology, an approach, as well as just the equipment. It's not just there for the sales, it's there for the partnership with the government of India, with the farmers themselves. And so we're involved in a couple of different ways: financing, strategically thinking through where they can grow their business, and then helping them and supporting them to do that in the field where we have the capability to do that. I'll give you an example somewhere else. We went into Niger, which is a country in West Africa, and with the support of IFC, Netifim designed and installed irrigation systems. We started out thinking it would be irrigation, pure and simple drip irrigation. We ended up actually adding into that solar power to power the pumps, because we realized that there was an abundance of solar power and it was quite difficult to get the fuel. And because of the fragility of the country, there's some conflict and violence there. It was better to create very self-contained systems that could operate. It's been hugely successful. We had more women than we expected to have, which was one success. And we also have had farmers go from having small areas to actually now exporting. So they're able to take what they're producing that they thought they would be selling in local markets and export it by the container load. Phenomenal success and a brilliant team. One of the things I'd like to raise here, and it's just my experience, is that the attitude of the Netifim team, of the Israelis who came in and engaged, was very, very proactive. They were really willing to engage in the field. They were willing to go out. Niger is a tough country. Please don't get me wrong. It's got fantastic opportunity. It's got enormous potential, but it is necessary by virtue of the conflict there. It is a complicated country to operate in. The teams that we've worked with have been really willing to face the challenges and have therefore had a great deal of reward and return from that investment. So brilliant experience. Not only that, but the team that we worked with trained local service providers who gained enormously. They built businesses around the training that they had, literally building small, medium-sized enterprises to provide services. 3 companies got launched as a result, and thanks to the time and energy and effort of IFC and Netifim together here. So this partnership goes outside of just what we can do with you into what we can do in a community to build the business infrastructure. Fantastic results. In India, you've also heard about this Better Life Farming Alliance. This is a slightly different example. In this particular case, you've got big brands. You've got IFC in there, you've got Bayer in there, which are agrochemicals, Netifim, Yara, Dahat, which is an off-taker which buys the product and sells it in the market, and Big Basket. So you've got these real powerhouses coming together and working with smallholder farmers. Again, a fantastic opportunity to take the best of knowledge from a range of different parties, whether it be finance and training in how to think as a smallholder farmer of your business from IFC, or whether it be agrochemicals from Bayer and Yara, or whether it be the technology to manage your crop, the agronomy and the drip irrigation equipment from Netifim. Again, super successful, and very much thinking in this particular case about climate smart. So a lot of training, a lot of coaching, a lot of capacity building. There's also this last mile retailer piece, and I think this is quite interesting for many of the people that we've worked with. One of the things that we do is not just focus on the farmers, but say, what's one step before the farmers? Who's actually interfacing with the farmers? It may not be Netifim. Netifim may not have 1,000, 2,000 people in India. Netifim may sell their equipment to distributors who then take it out to retailers who then take it out to the farm. What can we do with those retailers? How can we help those retailers so that there's not a loss of knowledge and capacity between Netifim, which is the global leader, and the retailer who may only have 200 or 300 farmers that they're working with, as opposed to millions of farmers. So that kind of thinking from both ends of the spectrum, where Netifim brings in its excellence, our partners, whoever they may be, bring in their excellence, their technological understanding, and their willingness and capacity to share that, along with our team in the field and the farmers, absorbing that information and making sure that it flows through. I think this is kind of important because many times IFC is looked at as a source of finance, which we are. That is fundamentally what we do. But we are so much more when we get in the field. And I think that once you get through the initial stages of working with IFC and you get beyond the discussions of the finance, which are critical, and you get into some of the other things that will come, the support that you get from the country managers, the support you get from the country officers who are present in the country to create opportunities with government or to create opportunities with other partners you might have strategically, along with the tactics that the advisory team can bring in, the value add is enormous. Now, that value add is thanks to the investment that the government of Israel has made into the World Bank Group. So it's a return on the investment made by the people of Israel into the World Bank Group, taking it on. It's a logical exchange, but I think that it's also one that works extremely well. I'll pause there. I know that we had quite a long time to speak, so I'll stop there because I think that I'll do better answering your questions than I will speaking to you anymore. But I thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your questions. If I can work out how to stop sharing the screen, I certainly will.
Thanks very much, Richard. Let me now turn to Sookie Kotsushi, who is the Principal Investment Officer in agribusiness and forestry in Africa.
Thank you very much. So hi everybody. So my name is Yo. So I'm also the farmer, so son of rice farmer back in Japan, but somehow became banker and then been in Africa for the last 12 years, 4 years in West Africa, Senegal, 8 years in Nairobi, Kenya. So I just want to take you through 2 slides. I hope you can see the screen. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, just want to share what we're doing on Agri-Side, investment side in Ghana and Kenya. So in Ghana, so we are, helping horticulture sector, VegPro, and then, financed oil palm company called the GOPDC. And then we were also in cocoa sector, providing credit line to cocoa buying companies through Stanbic Bank. And in Kenya, we're in various sectors like tea, coffee, horticulture, edible oil, and fast-moving consumer goods, also dairy, and then Twiga that Peter has already mentioned. And then, so really, as Richard talked about, we work very closely, investment and advisory. So for example, like a Pearl Dairy, it was fairly young company, started in Uganda, but the advisory team came in after, along with our investment, and then really helped thousands of small dairy farmers to improve productivity, reduce bacteria count, and then, help the company to manage good milk collection centers. And now they got pretty successful, so they're expanding into Kenya. And in horticulture sector, in addition to financing, clients tend to look for our support on workplace environment improvement or food safety aspects, or some of them are, working with local smallholders. Then they also need our advisory services on that front as well. And then if I can move to the next slide. So this is just a quick slide showing our investment criteria. So our minimum ticket is usually, $5 million or more. And then we prefer expansion projects over the greenfield project. But greenfield project, if there is like really experienced sponsor in that relevant field, then we could look at exceptionally. And then the third point is we want to see like a clear competitive advantage in agri project. So if company is serving domestic market, usually on cost side, you typically compete with imported products. And then we calculate usually like an imported landed price of competing product, and then whether company is competitive vis-a-vis that, or with our advisory services or assistance can cost come down to compete with those competitor or imports. And then if you're on export side, on commodity side, it's hard to predict prices. But we think if you're on like a lower quartile of global cost curve, you could survive, you know, in any up and, you know, any commodity cycle scenario. But because people have to eat, so price would usually hold at the marginal cost of lower side of a production curve, right? And then, or one could have like a differentiator, like if Kenyan tea taste profile is different than Indian tea, maybe you have a unique market. Or like, you know, Ethiopian horticulture exports when Colombia doesn't, then that's also a unique advantage. So we looked at sort of like a sustainable advantage. And then rest are like a pretty standard, like a development impact, and then environment and social sustainability, and then integrity ethic of the company and sponsor. Those are the typical things we look for. And then I will stop here and then happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Yo, and thank you for all the excellent speakers and for the energy you brought to this seminar. So let me now move to our almost final part of the seminar, which is the Q&A session. You can write down your questions in the chat box, and the participants will answer. If you'd like to direct any of your questions to a specific speaker, so just please indicate that. With that, I see we already have some questions posted here, so maybe I'll just read them and panelists can answer. The first one is, do you support innovation and hackathon events for a consortia of providers of innovation and tech in the field? Maybe I can turn to Peter or Paula to answer this question.
We've supported some hackathons through our World Bank colleagues have done that. Our team as a disruptive technology team has not yet done that, but that may be something we could look at. It depends on where it's held and for what purpose.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter, and we can follow up on that. While we're waiting for other questions, maybe I can ask some because I had some follow-ups from your intervention. So maybe to Paula, if you're here with us, what would be the best way, maybe the most practical way for Israeli companies to engage with IFC? Do you have any presence in Israel, or is it by countries? And what would be the most practical way to do that? Thanks.
Hi, Jabaf. Thank you. So no, unfortunately, we don't have a presence in Israel, but so following, just to be very specific, so I'm happy to be the point of contact, and Beatriz as well. So if you have any particular interest, you can write to either one of us, or you have our contact information, and we will direct you to the right counterparts. Obviously, you can also contact any of our colleagues here that are present today. You can also contact Yobav or Natalie on Adi, and we will be happy to help them navigate the IFC to find you the right point of contact. But if it's easier, Beatriz and I are, I guess, the closest to Israel in terms of geographic location and time zone. So we're happy to be your first point of contact if that can be of help.
Great, thanks very much, Paula. I see another question on East Africa. Is IFC invest in pilot projects toward cooperatives in East Africa? Maybe Yo and Richard.
So the keyword is cooperative. Okay, yes, actually, Kenya in tea sector, we are financing the biggest cooperative in the country called Kenya Tea Development Agency. So that's like owned by 600,000 farmers throughout Kenya. So it's kind of nationwide co-op. And as you know, tea is the biggest probably agri export out of Kenya, right? So it's very, very big gain for the farmers. So we did like 3 transactions with them, like finance their warehouse, and also, they are actually building, run of the river mini hydro so that they can reduce using wood to process, tea, but they can use there are a bunch of river around Mount Kenya, so they want to generate power. So we finance that. And also they are, expanding into logistical area because export of tea means logistics. And they thought, okay, let's have, third party, kind of a 3PL business in-house. And then we are supporting that as well. So we do finance co-ops. And of course, we have to look at how the governance system of the co-op works. But we can come in and even provide assistance on strengthening governance. And also not in Kenya, but in Ivory Coast, we actually financed 100 cooperatives of cacao so that co-op members can buy trucks to evacuate cocoa to the warehouses or a port. And then we worked with local leasing company on that, but it was a really heartwarming deal. So yeah, we're open to co-ops. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And there was another question, if you're located in Kenya or in Ivory Coast.
Oh, okay. I mean, actually, I'm based in Kenya, but currently, given the COVID, I'm back in Asia working from home, but I'm a kind of Kenya/Ethiopia guy. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And we have another question. Does IFC finance PPP projects? Are there PPP projects in the agriculture sector? Maybe Paula or Beatrice, if you any of you want to take it.
Yes, I'm happy to take that one because I have indeed seen PPPs. Obviously, IFC is very strong in PPPs. We have a sector that works on PPPs around the world. PPPs fall under our advisory work, where we advise, obviously, governments and private sector stakeholders on how to structure PPPs because they require a certain preparatory work in terms of the legal framework and so on and so forth. So there are PPPs in many different sectors, and we are actually, there are also PPPs, we could do PPPs in the agricultural sector. We would have to bring in our specialists from that group to sort of tell you what the requirements would be and what kind of examples we might have. If this is of interest, we could connect people with our specialists.
Great, thank you very much, Beatrice. I see there is a specific question here to Paula, and I think we can follow up on that afterwards on a vaccination company that provides vaccination establishment and management of high volume vaccination centers, and what is the best way to meet or work with IFC. So we can take it offline afterwards for a specific company, but Paula, if you see something more general about it, or Beatrice, so please.
So I would just say very quickly that health is a key priority for us. Obviously, with the COVID pandemic, the access to vaccination is also of utmost importance. So I would suggest that we organize a bilateral meeting, and I extend that offer to anyone else attending the webinar that is interested in discussing a specific project, and then we can take it from there.
Great. Thank you, Paula. This is very kind. I see there's no other questions. Maybe I can ask a more general question on the tech side and the VC investments. So more generally, how do you source your deals, and and get to the right investments? And also, how do you support companies that you invest in? Peter, you talked about C3 and your engagement with C3. So how do you support companies afterwards? Do they are they included in IFC projects or the World Bank projects in any way? Do you provide them with advice, or what do you do to as a VC investor to help these kind of companies?
Sure. So on sourcing, obviously comes from a number of different areas, whether it's what we track things in the press, look for very early stage companies. We work with investors that we know that are looking at things. We just, continually are speaking with investors in the market. And specifically, we invest in VC funds, which are present in the market at an earlier stage, and we can look at what they're investing in and either invest ourselves or co-invest with them through an arrangement that I described earlier. Your second question was about what value add we can bring to the table, and I think that's something that we're really have increased our focus on in the past year. What we do is we work closely with our colleagues who are in the agribusiness team, where they have a $4 billion plus agribusiness portfolio, and we look to make connections. What we've done in the past is we've introduced the tech company to a select group of IFC investment officers, whether it's in agribusiness or specifically in the region, such as Sookie, has taken part in that. And we look to, they're on the ground, they know the client base, and we can help them pick their, we can start a direct conversation between the tech company and our colleagues on the ground and say what clients could make sense. And we have some ideas, but we curate things, but it's really an iterative process as far as making the right introductions. And in terms of working with World Bank projects, we don't actively try to insert them into those projects, but certainly if they know of sorry, my cat is coming up here. If they know of projects that they want to learn more about, then we can get them in touch with people and just help them learn more. I think when we're physically present in the office, what we've done in the past is hold brown bag lunches, and we can do that virtually as well, to introduce the tech company. And we invite people from the World Bank and others who have common areas of interest to get in touch. And so it's really about just trying to make them part of the ecosystem. So those are a couple of areas that we can help add value in. And lastly, one other area I'll add is just the regulatory side, because I know that for our countries, for companies from Israel or just other countries going into a new emerging market can be challenging, can be intimidating. And we have advisory service people. We have World Bank colleagues that know the regulatory issues, and we can try to bring them up to speed with what the lay of the land is and what they need to do to enter the country.
Thanks very much, Peter. And I think your last point also on the regulation and how to enter countries is crucial. And I see many companies faced with it. And thank you for the answers. I hear these questions from many tech companies. So thank you for that. If we have no other questions, and I think we're running a little bit behind, so I think we covered most issues in this very informative session, and it was invaluable in showing how IFC operates and what opportunities there are for the Israeli private sector, be it agtech investment opportunities, advisory services, or agribusiness investments. It also clearly demonstrated the full alignment between IFC and I think the World Bank group as a whole, and what the Israeli private sector has to offer. And indeed, in recent years, we see closer engagement between IFC and the Israeli ecosystem, and a positive trend of engagement, knowledge sharing, piloting of solutions, and investments in Israeli disruptive solutions. One thing about the Israeli innovation, we know that it's the Israeli global success and innovation in agriculture, water, and some other sectors stems from its history as a developing country and the deep necessity in water due to water scarcity, the arid lands. And this is one of the reasons that Israeli solutions are so relevant for developing countries. And I think this session was very important in that sense. For Israeli companies, I can suggest Israeli companies that are interested in working with IFC to further understand how IFC works, what opportunities there are to engage, learn the language of development. This is very important, very different from developed countries, and truly understand the companies and how the company's goals are aligned with IFC goals, with the World Bank Group goals, and the SDGs. Look at the value you can create to the local communities. It's not only the project, but what contribution you can make to job creation for local communities, gender, as mentioned by some, climate change, climate impact. So I think it's important to see and speak the language of development. Now, one thing that was also mentioned is working with IFC is not, and it could be a lengthy process, and it's not a transactional relationship. It's more of a long-term partnership, and the value add is very significant, but it's a long-term relationship. That's from my side. I would like to thank deeply to our IFC colleagues who participated in today's session for your active engagement, not only in this session, but during our mutual collaboration on bringing Israeli private sector and IFC closer together. Thank you, Beatrice, for attending this seminar. Thank you, Paula, for leading this engagement, and for all the team for this for putting together this webinar. I would also like to thank my Israeli colleagues, Natalie and Adi from the Ministry of Economy, and to the Ministry of Finance for this mutual effort. If you want to reach out, the Israeli Economic and Trade Mission to the US, together with the trade attachés in the countries, are working to seek opportunities for Israeli companies in the international financial institutions like the World Bank. And if you want more information about working with the World Bank and other IFIs, so please reach out to Adi in the email she's just posted in the chat box, or will be posting shortly in the chat box. With that, let me thank you all for attending this webinar, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.